comes into session to see you and they've got this dynamic going on, are they aware of it, or how do they report about it? What's happening typically, if there is a typical kind of way that they present?
I think that the way that they present is often the person with a self-sacrifice or subjugation schema feels angry and resentful, right? They feel like their needs haven't been met. They feel like they've fallen into an intolerable situations over and over again. And so they end up building a lot of resentments.
Okay, so it's not that when they're reporting to you, what kinds of things are they saying? Are they recognizing that they're sacrificing to somebody who, say, for instance, has entitlement? Or are they more just saying that they're really unhappy and it's intolerable?
They are more saying that they're really unhappy. They're saying that it's intolerable. They're not seeing as much their own choice or the way that they have been part of maintaining that dynamic. My cat is subjugating me currently. Massive entitlement schema.
I know, I've heard that about cats. Well, so this is interesting. So it sounds like what happens is these schemas start interacting with each other and then they cause problems. As therapists working with women, how do you think like understanding it in this way is useful? Like, well, how might it guide them in doing acceptance and commitment therapy, for instance, with the couples?
Well, I think that it makes sense that these two schemas are very common for women. It makes sense that given that we have been financially dependent on men, that we would be hypervigilant of the other's needs. So throughout all of time, it would be evolutionarily beneficial for us to have adapted in this way for our survival. And it also makes sense around subjugation that we have had experiences where standing up for ourselves or advocating for our needs has gotten women negative consequences. And so I think it makes sense that these schemas are common for women. So I guess in terms of ACT, this is the primary pain that might show up for women. How do we use these processes to then notice that when these things show up, when we're in another person's shoes, or when guilt shows up, or when feeling powerlessness and helplessness shows up, that these might be a moment of choice or a cue or a signal for us to be able to advocate for ourselves or notice our needs or check in on our own experience, come back to what matters to us, and start learning to set limits, recognize our boundaries, make requests, advocate.
Okay, so what I hear in there is values-based actions taken by the woman,
right?
But being aware of the schema first. It's like being able to see, acknowledge, be conscious of it, and then take choice after that, linked to self-care.
Right, like using the schema as the primary pain that might be unavoidable for some women, some men as well.
So I hear you talking about empowering the woman through this work. Is there any chance that we're making women more entitled through this process?
So our goal is not necessarily to make women more entitled. Our goal is to make women feel more deserving, or more aware of their needs, more aware of their experiences, more aware of their ideal situation, so that they could negotiate and advocate for their needs, but not necessarily not necessarily be entitled, meaning an entitlement schema. When we are entitled, we advocate for our needs in such a way that it comes at the cost of somebody else's needs. And so being aware of our needs doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to run over somebody else's needs.
Let me just ask a little bit more about needs. And you mentioned sort of helping women to come into a place where they're not getting their needs met at the cost of someone else. So you're not creating an entitlement schema. Is there some piece of this that would be useful, like other things to look at when looking at meeting the needs of women in this position?
I think when we're looking at underlying needs are very general, like a need for consistency or honesty or reliability, affection.
Mm-hmm.
So we could get very caught up on what we want. I want a hug. But when we can label the underlying need, we have more flexibility.
Yeah, okay.
And often women with a self-sacrifice schema, they tend to, or subjugation, we let go of our underlying needs. So helping women identify their underlying needs and also identify the specific behaviors that could get those underlying needs met. So if you have an underlying need for affection, you could make a certain request like, can I get a hug? Or can I get a kiss? Or can I get a massage? Or would you be willing to hold my hand? So your partner might be saying no to all of these things or to many of these things, but advocating for your underlying needs means not letting go of your underlying need. You could be very flexible about the want or the request, but not letting go of the underlying need. So helping women advocate for their needs means negotiating in such a way, not where you are entitled, right? Entitlement looks like, I want a hug. You owe me a hug, and I get it this way. But it means being really flexible on what you want, but not letting go of the underlying need for affection or connection or consistency. And also negotiating in such a way where two people may have an ideal situation, and then there's an intolerable situation, and then there's all of these places where there's acceptable, right? The acceptable situation. When somebody has an entitlement schema and a self-sacrifice schema, you see a pattern where one person is getting their ideal over and over again, and one person continues to fall into an intolerable situation. So when you're helping people negotiate, you help them see that we get close enough to our ideal and we may get a good enough situation, but neither person falls into an intolerable situation.